name is Cornell Green, and I am the Failure Guy. Welcome to the podcast. On this episode of the Failure Guy podcast, my guest is Aidan Sowa. Aidan, thank you for joining us, and welcome to the conversation.
Yeah, great to be on the show.
Now, I like to start out every episode by having the guests say a little something about themselves, and I'd like to say to those who are watching and listening out in podcast land, Aidan is the first guest of mine that is not only someone that I don't know, but I like to say completely an unsolicited guest. We met when he contacted me and inquired about the podcast and then chose to pick today to be here. So first of all, Aidan, say hello, introduce yourself, tell the folks out there in podcast land a little bit about yourself.
Sure. So I run a public relations firm. It's called Velvet Voice PR. And essentially what we do is we just get people featured in different news outlets to help them be seen as like authorities within their industry. And I've been doing that for like the last like 5 years and just really have like a lot of connections within that space.
Okay, so that's fascinating. So let me ask a little bit about yourself. Not for nothing, you seem quite young. So if you don't mind my asking, how old are you?
Yeah, so I turned 25, I think it was a couple days ago, so just kind of
Wow.
remembering that. But yeah.
Okay, not for nothing. I feel a little old. This December, I'm going to be 64 years old. So I am well more than twice your age. Not that that matters. It's just I just feel like a geezer and hope I don't crumble away into dust before this podcast is over. So give us a little bit about your background. I did my research, but I'd like you to share with the guests. Where are you from? Where did you grow up? How did you get into PR?
Yeah, so I initially got into PR during the period of like COVID-19. I initially was running like a lead generation company. And even before that, I was working with the MIT Enterprise Forum Cambridge. But basically, I got into the PR industry because of necessity. I had no choice but to basically start a PR firm because my current company wasn't working out. So I had to basically pivot. And PR just happened to be that play. And that in turn was able to be basically turned into a successful business, basically by chance out of desperation. And I was able to turn that into a successful business.
Okay. So when you say that your former company was less than successful, obviously this is a podcast called The Failure Guy. So
Mhm.
give us some information of what that previous company was, how you started it, and what led to the downturn that had you decide to get into the PR.
Yeah, so I mean that company it's called Sowa Marketing Agency. We still do have components from it, so it's not like it's like a dead company by any means. We still generate revenue off of it, but we just
Right?
offer different services under that component. But essentially, what happened is we were doing around like it was basically very early on in my company, like around 10K a month revenue, not a lot of money, but still nonetheless, I was able to survive doing that. But basically, what happened is once COVID-19 came around. We basically lost all of our clients pretty much within like 2 days. And the reason for that is because advertising does take a bit of time and testing to actually work, and people were not patient at all at that point. People were calling
Mm,
me up with even without like the ti entire time finished up, and they're like, "I just want to end this. I can't afford to spend money on any type of marketing. Sorry, just gonna go completely on referral base. That's it."
right.
And that wasn't just happening to me. That was happening to literally every single person I knew during that time period. So I was basically talking to a lot of people. I was like, how are you pivoting from this? Because most people, it seemed like that I was just like the finishing blow. Oh, so it seemed. So I had to basically come up with a way to pivot. And that's how I came across the idea of branding. Because at that time, the number one question people were asking me was like, what makes you different? Tell me like why I need this during like one of the most difficult times. Like, why do I need to invest into my business and stuff? And I realized the biggest thing was is that there were thousands of others like lead generation companies. There was nothing greatly different about me. There were obviously different services we offered, but from the outside view, there was nothing big. So I started to look into like branding and started to get into that. And that's how I did it a bit for myself, and then I started doing that for clients.
Okay. Well, what you experience with, what your impatient clients is what I like to refer to as magic carpet thinking. A lot of, because I tend to be primarily a web developer. I do more inside of that, but primarily I develop what I call customer engagement platforms, because anyone can put up a website. You get a hosting package, they have a drag and drop page builder, but to have a presence on the internet that is the hub of your customer engagement strategies, that's what I work on. And also kind of slip business coaching in there in the process of developing for my clients. But a lot of people have this attitude that like, oh, well, I've got a website. It's been online for 2 months. Where are the clients? It's like, are you serious? You know that this takes some time for you to get seen and developed. And even once you engage contacts, you're not just going to have somebody click your website and choose to do business with you in 24 minutes. Let's be realistic. And now you're talking about advertising, which of course is about penetrating the zeitgeist, having people become aware of you. This takes a long period of time. And people who think, well, I hired you to do advertising and I've been advertising for a month. Where's the magic? And it's like, no, it doesn't work like that.
Yeah. And also, I mean, beyond that, we were actually generating them a pretty decent number of leads. But the issue was, which I ran into, which was a pretty big issue, was the fact that the actual clients would never even call the leads. Like I basically had to like call them up on like a daily basis, like motivating them to call their own leads. I'm like, you want to grow your business, right?
It's like, it's a process, people. What do you think's going to happen? You think that just because they're a lead, they're going to sprout like planting a seed? You have to follow up at all.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah, and like the ones who were kind of responding back were not even calling them. It was sending a text like 3 or 4 days later. And I was like, they probably already walking with someone else by then. And
Yeah.
it just didn't make any sense. And they're like, well, I gave it a shot and it didn't work out. I was like, you didn't really give it a shot.
No,
So
no. Come on. And I'm not telling you anything you don't know. You're in the industry, but leads are like vegetables in the refrigerator. They have a very short shelf life
yeah.
and what I call a freshness date. And if you don't get to them, I mean, 72 hours without follow up, they're dead. Ideally, really within 24 to 48 hours. You got to jump right on. Because, like you said, we're in the internet age now. Everybody's got their cell phone in their hand. And your competition is a click away from you.
Yeah.
They're gonna nope, okay, fine. Next name on the list. If you think they're sitting around and waiting for you because they contacted you, which obviously you had a number of people who, oh, well, they're a contact, right? They're gonna wait until I get around to them. No, they're
Yeah.
not. No, they're not. So this is interesting. So you're 25. You say you've been in the PR business for about 5 years. So
Yeah.
when did you start going into business? Because I'm doing the math backwards. Like, so that means
Yeah.
25 minus 1. So yeah. So talk about that.
I've been in the business for like a while. So before that, I was in the lead generation business for like around a year. And before that, I mean, technically speaking, I was working with the MIT Enterprise Forum even back in 2016 as an intern. So I was learning about marketing even back then. So it's kind of like a transition. Like initially, I learned about like a bit about like posting on social media, Twitter, that type of thing,
Right.
newsletters and stuff like that. Then I made the transition. I was like, oh, what if we could just generate them leads? And then kind of moving backwards a little bit towards like branding, completely different component, but also extremely valuable. And now we're kind of making the additional transition, sort of like where we're combining the two, where we're getting them a solid brand around themselves, and then on top of that, also doing a bit of the lead generation. Okay, now you have a solid brand. Now, why don't you try to like do some advertising either on Google or some type of advertising, some way to reach out to people? We have used a really successful thing which we've been doing. Some people might be familiar with it. It's basically mass short form content. Basically, what we do is we post like around 1,400 times a month across like Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, Facebook, those types of platforms on
Right.
secondary accounts. So like between like five, six, seven accounts. And that's a good way to basically go viral across those different platforms. And typically we use like YouTube clips and stuff like that. We repurpose it like 20 different times or whatever. We use different captions. We keep repurposing it over and over and over. And eventually, some of them go viral, some of them don't. It doesn't matter, but we just win by essentially bombarding the algorithms.
Right. Okay. So before we get more into the present day, I'm familiar with MIT, of course, Massachusetts Institute of Technology, but
Mhm.
the MIT Enterprise Forum. I mean, I can decipher what those words mean, but I don't know what the actual forum is all about. So give us a little bit of information about that, what that is in general, and how you became involved in it, and what your experience was with it.
Sure. So, basically I got into it. I mean, my father already knew the person at there, so it wasn't that hard to get like an internship there. I basically just had to like ask, and they were willing to give me that internship, so that wasn't too hard.
Okay.
Um,
So what
but
exactly is it though? What is the MIT Enterprise Forum? For the because I don't know, and I'm assuming
yeah,
most of our listeners themselves don't know either.
yeah. So I mean, they've since rebranded. I think they rebranded it as like the E Forum. But at the time, they were really working with the MIT Enterprise Forum. That's what they were called at that point in time. And the reason for that is because they were working with MIT. They had a specific partnership, which allowed them to be able to host events actually at MIT. It's mostly an event-based company, so the way
Okay.
they would basically generate all their business because they had a big existing list of people, as a lot of events businesses do, and they would send out a bunch of emails out to the existing list like, "Hey, we have this big of a list and stuff," and they were all about basically helping startups raise capital, and
Ah.
they basically hold like mock-up events, and they were like, "Okay, make this pitch," and the winner of like the things would be given like some sort of award or whatever. Like
Okay.
sometimes they would give people like a movie or something like that, so that way people could practice their pitches. And at the same time, the general public would visit these events, and they
Ah.
would start to figure out about some of these startups. They're like, "Oh wow, these companies are pretty interesting. Let me actually buy some of their products." And that so it was a kind of like combination of people got to practice their actual pitches, while at the same time, they got more publicity in terms of the general public even being aware that they exist.
Okay. Okay. I got it. I got it. So sort of like a public facing pitch fest kind of thing.
Exactly.
Okay,
Yeah.
and of
Yeah.
course, if you're associated with MIT, that's a pretty prestigious organization to hitch your wagon to. Okay, okay, get
Exactly.
it. So your experience during it. Now you say that you had a family connection that sort of got you in there. You were there as an intern. So tell us a little bit about what your internship there was like. Start us as here's Aiden and you're this newbie just coming into it, and walk us through the experience.
Sure. So, I mean, a lot of it was basically being able to come up with ways to like for tweets and stuff like that. I spent a decent amount of time coming up with like interesting tweets, which could potentially get more likes and comments and stuff, and analyzing prior social media things to figure out what would get the most engagement. Another thing was I spent a lot of time learning about new technologies because MIT is all about technologies and they wanted to be on top of that for all the new startups. So I spent a lot of time studying about like blockchain, studying about AI, all those different emerging trends, which were seen as quite important at that time. I remember the Internet of Things was definitely one of the things which
Right.
I studied. And between all of that, I learned those knowledge and also sending out to the existing newsletter and stuff like that. Those are the main things. And then there was like, the physical type of stuff where like, because it is an event-based business, like picking up like chairs and stuff like that and
Right.
sorting them
Right.
out and basically organizing the entire event, making sure that everyone has like their own like name tag and stuff like that.
Right, right. And obviously this was pre-COVID stuff when there was a lot of live, physically present activities going on.
Yeah, and that's actually why they had to rebrand to I think the E form because of COVID. They
Okay.
could not sustain themselves with MIT because of COVID.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, okay, I got it. Now, interesting background. I mean, I myself am a technology professional, and I tell the story in previous episodes that, I started out doing Unix system administration in the 90s and, worked with Lehman Brothers for about 4 years in the early 90s. Not my fault. Like I like to say, we just supported the network and the infrastructure. What they did with the trading, we're not responsible for why they no longer exist. That was the traders. Then I worked with Payne Weber during the Y2K conversion. And my last full-time job was working with an architectural design firm that had Steven Spielberg, Jerry Seinfeld, the Yale University, W Hotel chain, and the United Nations as private clients. And I used to joke, well, my clients are millionaires and their employers are billionaires, so I'm not going to get laid off unless the entire economy crashes. And then came the subprime mortgage meltdown in 2008, and the entire economy crashed, especially the real estate market. So when you're working for A-list architects and there's no real estate market anymore, eventually they're going to downsize and you're going to get laid off, and that's what happened. And I shot my resume around. Everybody wanted me to do four job titles for 80% of one salary. And that's why I went independent. I had no desire of starting a business. I loved my last full-time job. I was making six figures. I had total autonomy. I was respected by my coworkers and my employers. Um, and Unfortunately, and I say this in my book, I wrote a book in 2016, Do Business Better, Why Small Businesses Fail and How Not to. And the introductory chapter is entitled 2 Years of Steady Referrals Almost Ruined My Business. And this is kind of segue into what it is you do. Because before I got laid off, I got my first private referral, and I got steady work from them, and I got referrals from them, and I got second generation referrals. And for 2 years, the phone just rang off the hook. And I figured, well, somebody up there loves me. I just got to answer the phone and do the work, and everything's great. And then you can almost predict what happened. After 2 years, the phone stopped ringing. And as you say, your initial business was a, what's that again, lead generation business? Guess what
Yeah.
I wasn't doing for those 2 years? I wasn't generating leads. In fact, I realized after the phone well went dry, I didn't even know how to generate leads. I knew what I could do, but I didn't know how to start the conversation if someone said, hey, what can you do for my business? If they said, can you build me a website or can you set up my network? I could say, yes, how much? Here's the price. They like the price, we do the job. But if they said, what can you do? Go. I had no idea how to even start that conversation. And so let's just say that third year, rather lean. And that's when I realized I had to learn the fundamentals of it. Not what I learned was that business is not what you do. Business is selling what you do. After you sell it, then you can do it. But if you don't sell it, there's no business. You can be the best at what you do, but without a customer, you're sitting there, like I was in the third year waiting for the phone to ring. So interestingly, you started when you started a business in the lead generation business. So first of all, before getting into that, say to the audience why lead generation? Because a lot of people, if they even know about it, they think that's just marketing gibberish. That's just somebody trying to sell them an unnecessary service. Explain to our listeners and viewers why lead generation is so essential to every business, no matter what kind of business they are.
I basically see it as a strong backup in case, like, it's a reliable source of business once it's been built up for a very decent period of time. That's the way I see lead generation. Because sometimes people say, like, oh, referrals are nice and stuff like that. But the problem with referrals is that it's unpredictable. You don't know when it's going to come. And
Right.
ideally speaking, the most successful businesses which I've spoken to, they all have some sort of lead generation type of source in terms of revenue. And they're either using technology, they're using lead generation, but they have some sort of differentiator. Referrals will only take you to a certain level in business. If you also have like lead generation, like in the case of Realtor, Zillow, Trulia,
Right.
Realtor.com, that type of thing, if you
Right.
have those additional lead sources, it gives you some more flexibility because, there's sometimes cases where referrals, maybe they've already referred you all their friends and family for a while and you don't have any business. So maybe, like the
Yeah.
market's tough. You need to expand your influence. And that's what lead generation allows you to do.
Right.
And then you could turn some of those people into referrals. So
Exactly.
um, it's definitely not like a referrals versus lead generation model, which is the way some people think of it.
Thank you, thank you. That's a very excellent point. And you really laid down what happened to me. I had a great source of referrals, in fact, unprecedented for 2 years running. But as you said, then you exhaust everyone that worked with you and that knows you, referred everyone they knew who was a potential customer. And I converted all of those. And then, the way I put it is like you're a plumber. Okay. If my basement is flooded and my toilet doesn't flush, you're on speed dial. Okay. But once my basement is dry and the toilet's going, I don't need to call you anymore. You've done all of the work. I'm not mad at you. It's just there's nothing else for you to do for me. Thank you for your services. Maybe if something else happens, I have you on reference. But we're done. So if I'm depending, and very excellent point. Thank you so much for pointing out the fact that it's not referrals versus lead generation. It's referrals and lead generation. And as you really aptly pointed out, ideally you can turn your leads into a source of referrals because, as you know, there's no better source of referral than a truly satisfied customer. And this is why I do workshops with startup businesses from the perspective of the business fundamentals. And I say, follow up and follow through, as you said. You had a lot of clients, they got leads, they didn't follow up on the leads went cold. First mistake. Second of all, don't just take the money and do the minimum requirement of the work. A fulfilled customer is likely to shop around. An overwhelmingly satisfied customer, if you underpromise and overdeliver and exceed their expectations, that's going to be a person that's going to even subconsciously look for an opportunity. Like I say, everyone wants to have that guy. You got a mechanic and somebody says, "Hey man, your car's really running smooth." Oh, hey, nah, don't go to the auto shop. I got a guy. Let me give you their phone number. Or like women, if a hairstylist, or oh my God, your hair's looking great. It's like, where'd you go? Look, I just shop, but I got a girl. Okay, let me give you her number. Don't just go to anybody. You ask for Sheila. She's gonna hook you up. Okay, so that's what we want to be. We want to be the guy. Oh, I know a guy. Oh, you need a website? I know a guy. Oh, wait, you need PR? I know a guy. Let me give you Aidan's number. He's going to hook you up. So that's a very good point to bring up, because again, even I sort of fall into the trap of thinking that it's either or, and it's really both. So let's talk about your transition from, again, like you're saying, you're not doing lead generation, but you looked at where the market was. Everything kind of closed down because of the COVID shutdown. So what made you look at PR and say, maybe I need to focus particularly on that? Walk us through that sort of mindset.
It was direct feedback in terms of like what basically leads were saying. I mean, I basically took that and I also spoke to like a lot of other like marketing companies who guys to what they were doing and stuff. And that's how I kind of got into the PR space. So it's just basically direct feedback from clients. What makes you different? Hearing that like 30, 50 times and people telling me the world is gonna like end. I heard that ridiculous amount of times. I was hearing that on like a daily basis. Oh, the stock market might crash by like, I don't know,
Yeah.
20% tomorrow. Like I need to get my money out of the stock. I need to basically put my cash down. And so people are like, I'm not even gonna be spending any marketing money on marketing for the next 3 years and crazy stuff like that. And I was hearing that almost on a daily basis, at least twice for like that first 2, 3 weeks of like panic of like COVID-19.
Yeah.
And so that basically, like, I needed to make money somehow. So I basically was resourceful in terms of thinking, oh, maybe I can help people brand themselves, because it seems like the number one thing they're concerned about is not whether like you can generate the leads, but hey, can I actually trust you? And that was the number
Mm,
one thing. People want to do business with only people they trust. They didn't want to take any quote unquote risks,
right.
taking on like working with a new company. So by essentially having a brand that eliminated that risk, because they're like, okay, this person's willing to put themselves out there, or they have like credible news outlets talking about themselves. Oh, I think I could trust that guy versus a random guy on Facebook who I've never heard of and there's nothing on him online.
Right, right. Now it's interesting. I know because you're familiar with the brand business of marketing. What they call the know, like, and trust factor.
Yeah.
And so you raise an excellent point that people, because everyone, the first thing people are going to do is they're going to Google you,
Yeah.
right? And so if and also before I even go down that rabbit hole, talk to our audience about the distinction between promotion and public relations.
Yeah, so promotion is basically you saying like, "Oh, I'm the best, work with me," and PR is basically someone else saying like, "Oh, he's great, work with him." So it's
Okay.
that third party credibility.
Okay, okay. And why is that third party credibility so important?
Third party credibility is important because we essentially live in a trust epidemic. That's the best way to put it. People
I like that.
Yeah, and the reality is, if you went back like 10, 15 years, people are a lot more trusting in terms of like they were willing to take more risks in terms of doing business. But due to people getting ripped off so many times, they're like so like they go into there with like all guards up, trying to find like any like negative views, anything which might suggest something's a bad purchase or something. And as a result, like branding is basically more of a necessity than ever.
Okay, okay, okay. And third party basically vouching for you. Because like you say, in promotion, everyone, and I deal with this with my web design clients, I tell them, I ask them a simple thing. I say, because most of my clients, in fact, I prefer to choose clients that already have a website, maybe even a couple of iterations, because I'm not trying to make the distinction you should have a website. I'm trying to make the distinction you should have an effective website. And so I look at their existing website. I say, look at your copy and look at the pronouns of your marketing copy. If most of the pronouns are first person, I, we, our, you're talking about yourself. If the pronouns are not what we can do for you, you will find, you will get, you will gain, you will discover. Because nobody cares about me. My customers don't care how old I am. They don't care how long I've been in business, what my background is, where I went to school, if I went to school. They care what I can do for them, and I love to say this about myself. I didn't initially, when I went independent, I didn't initially start in web design. I started doing what I was doing in the corporate world, which was server administration, setting up servers, setting up networks, infrastructure, workstations, whatever have you. So there was a certain amount of small businesses, an art gallery, an architectural firm, that sort of thing. But eventually, there was only so much local small businesses that needed infrastructure support. Things were kind of running out. And I was sitting at dinner with some friends of mine from high school and crying in my beer and saying, the phone's not ringing, and people keep asking me about this web stuff. And they said, well, Cornell, you used to have to download the source code for web servers and compile it. You know how to do webs. Like, yeah, I'm not a web guy though. Because see, I'm thinking graphic designer, and this friend of mine sitting across from me said, wait a minute, let me get this straight. You're complaining that you're not getting work. People are asking you to do a thing that you can do, and you're saying no? And I literally looked across the table and said, so I should say yes? And it's a good thing that friend was sitting across the table and not next to me, because they literally would have slapped me in the back of the head. But I was such a tech head that my first conversations with potential web clients was I started talking about that I developed on WordPress because it was the most popular content management system in the world, built on open source software, and blah, 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 blah. And you could see people's eyes glazing over as I'm talking to them. And it's like, Cornell, nobody cares about any of that, even if they understand what you're talking about. And now my conversation consists of this. Would you like to save time, make more money, and get more customers online? And if the answer is yes, we've got a conversation. Notice I'm not talking about what I do, who I am, what I use, any sort of technology. If you're in business and you're operating online and you want those three objectives, we have a conversation. Because that's what you care about, not who I am. Now, if you ask me, okay, how do we do that? All right, now is where my skills, my backgrounds, my bona fides come in. But I don't start the conversation talking about myself. And I have a timeline on my website where I list the things that I have done, sort of like my own sort of PR reel, the events I've done, the workshops I've been. Because this is not me saying I'm the guy. I was at SUNY Global Center and I did this workshop. I did a workshop at the Brooklyn Borough President's office. I was flown to France to speak as a subject matter expert at the Stade de France in 2016. So I get it. I sort of kind of doing my own PR. But so many people don't understand or appreciate the distinction between hyping yourself. Oh, well, I've got a website that talks about me, and I've got a Facebook page that talks about me, and I've got a Twitter feed that talks about me, and then I've got TikTok, which is me talking about me. But that's not PR, is it?
No, no, it's not. It's definitely, I mean, it can be effective to be able to have some stuff about you. Like people who are confident for sure. But
Yes.
I would definitely say that's more so on the advertising side.
Okay, okay. So, how does one get credible news sources, periodicals, local news stations? How do they get themselves placed in these things?
Sure. I mean, there's a number of different sites out there, such as harrow.com. Another one is quoted, quoted.com. And I think there's another one. It's called feature.com. And it sounds spelled exactly the way you'd imagine. And all these different sites, essentially, journalists always have different queries. They're looking for a subject matter expert within whatever niche it is, and you're just
Ah,
basically filtered by those particular niches. You respond back quickly to those things, and they'll just cite you as a subject matter expert. At least some of them feature Forbes, MSN, different ones, and
wow.
you get a citation within these different publications. And as a result, then you can say as seen on, as featured in, and you can link back to that article. Not to
Ah,
mention, when you get these different links, you get what's called link juice, so you
yeah.
have all these different links pointing back to yourself, and that helps you greatly over time with website traffic, which is one aspect which I notice a lot of people in PR don't even mention at all. And it's definitely a crucial aspect of having beyond just branding, what type of value you're getting. When you're getting all these links back to your website over time, that does lead to more business, more people visiting out,
Yeah.
reaching out to you
Yeah.
directly.
In the SEO world, we call those backlinks. But
Yeah.
see, first of all, this is interesting. I did not know that it sounds like in the technical world what's called an RFP, a request for proposal, and as I hear you mention it, journalists, especially journalists that are full time, say they have a column appears on a regular basis. They have a spot that appears, 5 times a week. The half hour before the actual hard news goes on, and they've got to fill that up every day. And
Yes.
they're not going to, so they're like, you know what, I need to fill this 20 minutes minus commercials. And so, yeah, of course they would say, look, here's what I'm looking for. I want to do a story on X. Are you someone who knows something about that? If you are, I'll stick you in there because that gives me the content that I need. I'm dead without content. I'm just a face looking into camera saying, hi, Bob, we've got nothing to talk about. Back to you. But how many, like most people, I didn't know that. I've been building websites for people since 2010, and I wasn't aware that there are these websites that one can go to and plug themselves in. And I'm sure
Yeah.
there's other things on top of just those simple sites that you listed.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, another way, which is also very easy for most like local businesses, is literally just reaching out to your local newspapers in terms of like local news outlets. They're very, very easy to pitch from like my experience, just because I mean they actually struggle to get quality content. There's a reality that a lot of local basically a lot of local journalists, which aren't like, New York Times, Wall Street Journal, that type of thing, local newspapers, they're really struggling in terms of having quality content, local experts. So if you reach out to them and you actually are providing like, some like you can either be commenting on some recent local news, and be providing value, they'll definitely be open to potentially highlighting you. That's definitely an effective way as well. Like I know several of our clients are basically connected with pretty much every single one of their local news outlets, have been featured in all of them because it's not that hard to get featured to local news outlets. Now, on the other hand, if you're trying to get into something like Good Morning America and stuff like that, that's going to require a lot more news coverage typically to be able to get into those types
Right.
of things, because those types of news outlets have like higher criteria of like what they
Yes.
look for, and they have like, you have to have like a crazy good story, you got to be able to be Googleable and be able to have like all this like stuff coming up about you about why you're great and stuff like that. They want you
Right.
to be vetted before they even bring you
Right.
on.
Right. So would you say that part of what you do or can do for your clients is to build that ladder of credibility that might ultimately position them for a
Yeah,
thing like a Good Morning America, AM New
sure.
York, or something like that?
Definitely. In fact, one of our clients, her name is like Coach Michelle Hong. She's incredibly popular on like TikTok, and I think she has a couple million followers at this point.
Wow.
But her issue was that she didn't have that much PR prior. Like she had a little bit, but not that much. We got her into like Forbes and a couple of other news publications, and as a result, like a few months later, she just got reached out to by like Good Morning America, and they had her on their show. But I don't believe that would have happened if she didn't have that news coverage, because the
Right.
reality is when you searched her up prior, she didn't have anything which really highlight her. At that point, now she had all these different news outlets. People go to the website like, okay, now I understand why she's good at what she's doing. She's not just a TikToker. There's also,
Right.
credible news outlets talking about how she's good at skating and being a great skating teacher.
Right. Right. That's interesting because a lot of people seem to think, oh, well, I've got fill in the number followers on Instagram, on TikTok. I've got a Facebook page that, gets blah 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 likes for each post. But as you're saying, that's popularity, but that's not the same as credibility. you
Yeah.
know and also because as I said, I do my research, especially since you're a person that I did not know previous to this conversation, and I saw that one of the things that you focus on is the fact when I Google your name, what's going to show up.
Yeah.
And that as you said, that's sort of that credibility. I don't know, I want to call it a credibility canvas, if you will. So if
Sure.
all I see are things that link back to you, like, okay, your LinkedIn, your Facebook, your TikTok, your Instagram, meh. But if I see, oh, you got an interview here, you were on this podcast, you were on a radio program, even if it was local,
Yeah.
this is, as you say, this is a third party vetting that you are somebody. You're not just a popular TikToker. Because, my 12-year-old could be a popular TikToker. That
Yeah.
doesn't mean I'm going to have them be a subject matter expert on the latest, engineering trends, unless they're some
Exactly.
kind of prodigy. So that aspect of and again, that's a slow build. You're not going to start out and then in a week you're going to have all of that. You're going to have to build that up over time, and be patient with it, right?
Yeah, I mean, it does depend. I mean, some areas it's a lot easier. Like in France, it's ridiculously easy. For some weird reason,
Really?
people in France don't get really featured in the media that often. So, like one person we knew, like she got featured into like Yahoo Finance, and literally like she posted on LinkedIn and went super viral. And she was organically, this is the time before Meta verified and stuff. And she just got verified on Instagram, got 300,000 followers, and all these news outlets wanted to reach out to her all because she was featured with Yahoo Finance. So it's kind of weird. Some countries it's actually a lot easier to go viral due to the news. In the United States, it's definitely more difficult. But essentially, the value is, being able to send it out to your existing newsletter, existing social media, and you can organically use that to be able to get more referrals and like credibility.
Okay, okay, that's fascinating. And again, I just want to sort of circle back to the fact that a lot of people would be surprised because I'm putting myself in the mind of your typical business person, your typical solo entrepreneur. The thought of appearing in even local news is that somehow they're going to come to you.
Yeah.
You're going to have done something, and then there's going to be a ring on your phone or something in your inbox saying, "Hey, person who suddenly is on my radar." So the thought of just going to the media source, most people would never even consider that as an option.
Right. And that's just a flawed thinking. I often give an analogy of like, yeah, it could happen, but you could also win the lottery, right? How come And it's literally that probability. The people who were featured by people calling them, I always ask them, like, well, tell me, when did that happen? Was it 20 years ago? Was it 10 years ago? And every single time, it was always 10 plus years ago. Because what
Wow.
people don't understand is the media game has changed. We're living in the age of, like, the internet, all these different things with stuff like Harrow quoted, stuff like that. They are not going to go out of their way to find another source, but they could literally just go to Harrow, find a bunch of people pitching them, and be able to respond back to them. They're not going to go out of their way to be able to search for different companies. That's way too much time, and they're just not going to do it. So the idea of someone calling you when you don't have any Google presence or very little, it doesn't make any logical sense, and it pretty much never happens.
Right, right. Well, that's again that you raised such excellent. I mean, the days of the shoe leather express. The thought of like the 1940s. A reporter with the snap brim hat and the pencil behind his ear. Fast talking and what. That's not happening anymore. Like I think it's much easier for journalists to sit in front of their laptop and go to these news sources to put out a request and then to wait for the people. Now, I'm assuming even though you can go to Quoted or Harrow,
Hmm.
one of the things that these journalists are going to do when they get these responses is they're probably going to go and Google these people to see
Yeah,
what's already out there for them. So,
exactly.
so while this is a source, it helps if you are already seeding the cloud. Now, and maybe you need to get one of these things to be part of that, but so it's like the more successful you are, the more successful you are. The more
Yeah.
noted you are, the more noted you are, and it almost seems like well, where do I start? We start by starting.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, there's certain news outlets. The good news is that there's certain ones like on, for example, Harrow. It's called like Authority Magazine. It looks really, really cool, but the reality is like pretty much anyone could get on as long as they have a solid pitch. So that allows people to basically have that. So that once you get onto something like that, then these other journalists search it up, and they're not necessarily familiar with Authority Magazine, but they're like, oh wow, he's been featured in something, and then it's a
Right.
lot easier to get featured into some other bigger
Right.
publications.
Just got to get your foot in the door, and then the rest will happen. And you overcome that anxiety.
Yeah.
Of oh my God, I'm nobody. Who am I? Nobody's going to want to talk to me. But then once that first and look, let's face it, seeing yourself in something that's not something you yourself put up there. It's not your Facebook page. It's not your website. It's wow, look, that's me and someone is talking about me. Even for obviously, this is what we want for our prospects and leads to see about us. But there's a value for the person themselves, for the business owner, for the entrepreneur, to see that, to get that credibility within themselves.
Yes.
Yeah. So that is an interesting point. And now I wanted to ask you a question, which I usually don't have to ask my guests because I know them either personally or professionally. What had you reach out to a podcast called The Failure Guy?
Well, I mean, we're reaching out to a number of different podcasts, so that just kind of seemed sort of interesting. Yeah, I mean, I've been on a lot of entrepreneurial types of podcasts, and it seemed kind of interesting. I
Yes.
haven't been on any like failure related podcasts,
Oh,
so
okay.
it
And
seemed kind
obviously,
of
I do
interesting.
know, in doing my research, I actually did look at some of the other podcasts that you were on because I like to do, especially with people I don't know personally, do a little vetting and whatever have you. But I always, even people that I know, I always ask them that question because when I decided to start this idea, I came up with the idea in 2017, and it was a couple of years before I actually launched the podcast. And what pushed me over the edge, I'm walking around, I'm listening to NPR on my, in my earbuds, and there's a ad or an announcement in between the program I'm listening to that the Columbia University Teachers College was having a 2-day event on the success of failure, and it was staff member, some of the academics and some invited guests who were talking about failure and how failure is a component of success. And I thought that's almost like a sign that maybe I should take this crazy idea called the failure guy. But when I talk to my friends and families, you would think I was standing on the ledge of a 20-story building about to jump. They were like, "Oh, dude, podcast is a great idea, but don't call it failure. What do you don't you?" Is as if like Beetlejuice, like if you say it 3 times, you're gonna make it happen. And I was like, "This is why I want to start the podcast. Nobody wants to talk about failure." And I have failure be an acronym, which I expand to first attempts in learning using real experience. Because if you think about it, everything, and you know this because you've had experience in being your own business. Nobody succeeds the first attempt, the first time out of the gate. And I always use the example of a child learning how to walk. It takes almost a year. And every attempt until they actually start walking is technically failure. But they don't give up. They have to learn how to stand on their own feet. They have to manage balance. They have to learn how to put one foot in front of the other. They have to realize that you need to alternate the feet in front of each other, and you have to balance while you're moving. Don't get too excited. Don't lean over and get top heavy. And then the next thing you know, they're running around like, you have to start baby proofing everything. And if children looked at failure the way adults do, we would all still be crawling. And people are so afraid. I have had experiences in my life where I was so afraid to fail that I didn't even try.
Yeah.
And that is why I started this podcast because I was like, let's talk about it. Let's talk about when we failed, when we went, face planted, when we were trying to make a grand entrance or, trying to impress somebody and we walked into a wall or, just a metaphorical equivalent of that. Because guess what? It doesn't kill us. We didn't die. We didn't burst into flames. And if we were paying attention, we probably learned something. Now,
Yeah.
I believe I also got some queries from your company about some of your clients, if they would
Hmm.
be interested. And as I said in the email response, and I would love you to get back to them. They say, "Would you like me to send their portfolio?" No, I don't need that. Send them the link and tell them to book a conversation.
Yeah.
I'm not that picky, and and again, full disclosure, folks, I need guests. Just like those journalists need, people come in. I need guests. Without a guest, it's me talking to the camera for an hour, and that's boring. Nobody wants to hear that. And I love talking with people that I don't know anything about. And that's why you notice we didn't do a pre-interview before this
Okay.
because I've learned that takes the energy out of the conversation. I want to discover, along with the listeners, along with the viewers, I did a bit of research, to have an idea so that we didn't suddenly sit around here with a bunch of dead air. And I noticed in the intake form that I had you fill out that you mentioned that your significant failure was getting scammed for $20,000 in a single month.
Yeah.
So let's talk about that.
Yeah, that was a pretty painful experience. Basically, there was a certain individual who was claiming that like the big thing at during like the COVID-19 era, like after I kind of got into branding that first year, was this idea of Instagram verification. There were a ton of different providers
Mm,
and stuff like that. So a couple of my clients want to get verified. He claimed he could do it for XYZ price. I think it was like 4,000 or 5,000 a piece.
right.
Basically, ended up paying the guy around 20,000. Turns out he just spent that money and just going to fancy hotels, never actually did
Yeah.
anything.
Yeah, yeah. Now, I did my research, so I know who it is you're referring to. I'm not going to mention them if you don't want me to, but because I was Googling you, and then there was this sort of scam alert website, and there was
Hmm.
one negative review for your business, but then there were three people who says, no, 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 that wasn't Sowa, that was Mr. X. Okay,
Yeah,
so he is fine. Nobody, in fact, one said no one who's ever personally known Aidan has ever said anything negative about him. But this scammer kind of tarnished your reputation because
yeah,
people took that you were the source of their being scammed. And again,
yeah.
reputation it's important to maintain and manage your reputation.
Exactly, exactly. Yeah, I think what you're referring to is this guy called Chubbs Wilson. That
Yes,
guy.
yes, that's what we're
Yeah,
talking about.
yeah. But there's actually a second individual.
Oh
His
wow.
name. Yeah. So it was actually two of them. They actually both did Instagram scams during that
Oh
time. But
no.
yeah, that guy's actually a separate individual. The one for 20K was this guy whose name was like Clifton Alexander. He's like he calls himself a celebrity entrepreneur and stuff like that. Like he helps
Oh.
people. But the reality is if one searched him up on Google, a lot not that much negative stuff would come up on him, but he's scammed multiple people. There's this other guy who's like called him out basically for scamming.
Hmm.
And prior to that, one would actually what I later figured out is that's not even his real name. He changed he changed his name. His name was like quite different before, and he actually has like a history of like being in jail and doing all these different things. Like before that, he was caught for like having this massive amount of weed. He was thrown in jail for that. He was selling a lot of it, basically. And
Yeah.
then prior to that, he was also he has like a whole list. For me to take that would be it
Yeah,
would be the
yeah.
entire
That'd be a separate
podcast.
episode. Just
But it was crazy. Yeah, it was crazy. And I was like, what have I got myself into? But I actually leveraged that to my advantage in a
hmm.
way because I basically brought up to him, like, I was like, listen, I said, I know your real name. I know who you are at this point. I know that, like, if we bring this up to a district attorney, it would not look good. You're on probation right now. How do you think
Wow.
they're going to react if I call them up and I basically say, you scammed me for 20K? I was like, that's not going to go well. And I say, on top of that, I say, I know other people you've done this to, too. And I know their names, I know their phone numbers, etc. How do you think that's going to look when multiple people are reaching out in regards to that? And he was like, yeah, I don't want to go back to jail. And so I was
I would
able
think
to,
not.
yeah. And so I was able to recoup around like approximately 11,000 of that. I never got
Wow.
back the full amount, but I was able to basically say that because he didn't want to go back to jail. He didn't want me
Yeah.
calling up the district attorney, etc. So, I mean, I'll take it for what it was. Learned a lesson in terms of like not sending wires and stuff like that. And also, really doing research in terms of like who individuals are. And some people could be quite clever in terms of changing their names and stuff like that. So just because nothing comes up doesn't mean there isn't anything negative on that
Yeah.
particular
Yeah.
individual.
Kind of like an identity shell game, if you will. They just keep, well, I'll be somebody else, and I'll move over here, and I'll adopt a different identity and a different scam, but it's still a scammer, you know.
Yeah, yeah,
And that's very indicative. I mean, first of all, nobody likes to get beat. I mean, there was a time in my life where 20K would have been a good year for me, much
yeah,
much less to lose that in one shot. And but in terms of what the Failure Guy podcast is about, that's not going to happen to you again
yeah.
because you learn can't be too trusting. Vet who you're doing business with. Don't take people at their word, you know. And these are important things. Now, see, a lot of people would have curled up under the bed, crying in their pillow, and maybe would have just given up. Oh well, I'm a failure. That's it. I'm done. I'm an idiot. What do I do? You said no, 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 no. Hold up a second, homie. You're not walking away with all of my money. I might not get it all back, but I'm getting some of it back. I might have gotten burned, but I also learned, and I'm gonna take the lessons that I've learned here and put it to use for myself. You know. Now, also in doing my research, I saw that there was an initial experience when you first went into business, when you signed a contract and everything was great, but no, you got the gig and you fulfilled the services, but you didn't get a signed contract. And you ran into
Yeah.
some trouble with that. Say something about that for our listeners.
Yeah, so I mean, initially speaking, one of my clients, I basically delivered the service, and then he wanted to like well, that was very early on with when I first got into business. He wanted to do a chargeback on me. And
Mm.
actually I did have a signed agreement, but the thing was is that in the PR business, in the especially the Facebook ads type of thing, it doesn't matter. I could have a ton of signed contract, doesn't matter because he'll just
Mm.
win the chargeback anyway.
Ah.
It's kind of rigged in that favor. Like I could show proof of delivery, I could show screenshots, Stripe, all these different things. I've even talked to them. They specifically have told me that they're almost like rigged against people like myself, that I'm
Right.
basically going to lose no matter what.
Right.
So
They
that's
tend
what
to
he was.
take the payee's word over, the vendor.
Yeah, so I basically explained to him that like, hey, if you do that, more likely than not, you're probably going to bankrupt me, and I don't really want that. So, is there anything I could do to fix that? And so for a while, he was like, no, I just want my money back. I called the guy like 20 times, and eventually we arrived at somewhat of a compromise where I basically came up with the idea of like, be able to make him a lot more money because I was like, okay, so you want $1,500. What if I could actually make you a lot more money than that and you could basically see it right away, like 20, 30K? Would that be more appealing than just getting 1,500? And he was like, of course, as any logical individual would be.
Right.
And I basically said, well, we could do exactly that. Basically, what we're going to do is we're going to send out ringless voicemails, text, emails to all of your existing audience. When was the last time you reached out to them? Oh, I have people within like the last 6 months. He has like 20K lists. And soon enough, he had like 20, 30, 40 people just calling him left and right. And he made a bunch of sales in the real estate business,
Oh.
well more than what he
Okay.
actually paid me. He probably made
Right.
like tens of thousands of dollars at
Yeah.
least. And then he was after he got that all these calls, texts, he wasn't even thinking about the chargeback anymore. And I said, "Can you let that go?" He's like, "Yeah, of course."
Yeah.
And so that was, and that also helped that I met the guy locally. I was able to basically try to be
Mm.
able to say like, "Hey, I actually met you, and your entire thing is about giving back to people in charity." I said, "Here you're trying to like bankrupt one of your fellow people in the same state."
Right.
So that seems kind of ironic. And so that's how I was able to basically convince him to not bankrupt me, which have been quite bad. And I also told him, like, deep down, I spent this money on ads. You know that I don't pocket everything. I explained this to you up front, and that would be downright fraudulent for you to do all
Right.
those things.
Right.
Um,
Well,
so
see,
I
that
was
is.
able to convince him out of it. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, see, this is very interesting, and thank you for sharing that and providing the context. And this is something I really want the listeners out there to hear and understand. Is you took a situation that could have been the ultimate failure. It could have ended your business, you know,
Yep.
and you said, I'm going to have to eat some humble pie and I'm going to have to take a loss. And basically, I'm going to have to give away a lot of valuable services for free. But I'm not going to go bankrupt. B, I'm never going to find myself in this kind of a situation again. And
Yeah.
also, I'm going to learn the value of what I'm offering. This guy isn't paying for it. But I'm going to see, kind of because I have to, because I got to save my business here. So I got to come up with the goods, not potentials. I got to bring in some dough for this guy. And I'm sure that showed you what you were capable of. And talk about that for a little bit. Talk about it as what you learned, not just how to not get plowed under by this guy, but what you learned about what you and your business was actually capable of doing. Granted, with your back up against the wall, but just seeing the potential of what you're capable of at all from that experience.
Yeah, definitely. Also, I started to kind of take some other people at their word at like my abilities because I talked to certain people around that time, like, hey, do you got any suggestions dealing with this? Most people were just saying to me, "Oh, you're screwed." Just like file, like look up ways to handle bankruptcy and stuff. That was my general response, which I got from people, and I was like kind of shocked at that. But I was like, okay, so there's no real way to handle it, just like fraud. And I was able to kind of think outside the box. So now, like, when someone says something to me like, "Oh, like you're not capable of XYZ" and stuff like that, and multiple people have said stuff like that to me in the past. I think back to times like that where I was able to do things where like 99% of people were telling me I was basically just screwed.
Right, right. But did you see, really the question I'm asking is you had to deliver a clear monetary benefit for this guy. You had to do things, you had to provide services that generated a significant amount of revenue to get this guy off your back.
Yeah,
And in
exactly.
doing that, whether you were properly compensated for it, you learned in reality that you were capable of doing that. Now,
Yeah.
it was out of necessity. And I'm sure you didn't just say, okay, and then never did that again. You saw, hold up a second. First of all, bump these people that are telling me to just give up, roll over, and play dead. Look at what I did. I brought in the bacon here. So I can do this again, except next time I'm going to get paid for doing that.
Exactly.
But look at
Exactly.
me. Hey, folks, Mr. I should go into bankruptcy. Look at what I did.
Yeah.
You know, and so how did that feel? That had to be a good, kind of like a victory inside a defeat, if you will. But but it had to feel kind of good when you looked at yourself and saw what you could do, what you
Yeah, I
did.
felt greatly relieved at that point because I was like, I only just been in business for like 2 weeks. I was like, there's no way it's gonna like end this quickly. Especially not to someone like was like just a local guy who I actually met and stuff. I felt like that would be ridiculous. And I just refused to believe that like that was going to happen. I was like, I brainstormed like crazy to solve that entire thing. Like I was writing down notes as like maybe this solution, and I kept coming back to him with like potential solutions.
How about
But
this?
I had
How
like a
about
whole
this?
list. Yeah.
Wow, wow. And something that I like to say, I usually say at the end of each podcast, is that failure is only defeat if we give up,
Yeah.
you know? And initially, when this guy says, nope, I just want to charge back, not trying to hear you, I just want to charge back. Initially, it was just like, oh, crap, I'm done for.
Yeah.
And you could have just listened to your advisors and filed bankruptcy. But after getting, I'm sure there was some hyperventilation and a couple of days of existential dread. And then you're like, hold on a minute. No. Like you said, I haven't even been at this a month. I'm not going out that quick.
Yeah, exactly.
It's got to be something. And then you brainstorm. You just like, you consider every possible scenario. Like something's got to happen here, that's going to turn this into not the death of my business. Yeah, I'm going to
Yeah.
have to eat a loss. Yeah, what I've done for this guy, not only should he have paid me what he wanted to charge back, he should have paid me multiples of what I charged him for what I'm delivering for him. But
Fair.
the benefit for me is that my company hasn't gone under, and I now, because everyone can possibly do things, but you don't really walk with the pep in your step and the swag in your walk until you actually have done it and you know that you've done it. So very early, not even in your first quarter of business, not only did you not fail, but you're like, I generated tens of thousands of dollars in revenue for this guy.
Yeah.
I can actually do that. So that had to be quite a turnaround from, oh my God, I'm going under for the third time, to, hold up a second, I'm the real deal.
Yeah, definitely. And that's what really pushed me towards like basically I was able to generate a lot of clients through like some of those case studies. And that helped me for a while, which made the lead generation business somewhat successful. Like I was doing 10K a month, not exactly like massive, like it's definitely not anywhere up there in like the big
Right.
businesses or anything
Did,
like
did you
that.
have any staff at that point?
No, I didn't.
Okay, so you 10K a month, that's 120 grand a year.
Yeah, yeah, and that was all profit because I didn't really have any staff. But yeah, yeah, yeah. But basically, I was doing that, and I was somewhat satisfied at that point in time. But then the whole COVID-19 thing, and that basically just crashed all overnight.
Yeah, yeah. It was good while it lasted, but at least
Yeah,
at least you had that. But and see, I mean, I think that really is the perfect exemplar of what this podcast is all about, is that failure is, I like to say, failure is part of the process. A lot of times that's just hypothetical speaking or figurative, but in your case, quite literally, what could have been your ultimate failure ended up being the genesis of your successful business, because
yes,
you refuse to accept defeat from that. You can, and many people twice your age, would have just said, game over, man. But you refuse to accept the failure as defeat. You said, okay, as far as this negotiation going, I'm losing money here. So in one way of looking at it, I failed, because what I'm going to do for what I'm getting paid, I'm losing money. But I'm not going to be defeated by this. And I'm going to come out of this with the ability to, A, continue to do business and not have to file bankruptcy. But also, I have learned so much and I have acquired actual marketable skills that my next customers are going to pay me more than 1,500 bucks. And
yeah.
I know I'm going to deliver them more value than what they're paying me for, because I've already done it.
Yeah, definitely. I would also say it really helped because like that wasn't like the first situation where like I mean the last situation where I had to basically deal with like a difficult customer, but like when I addressed it wasn't like something totally new. Like there was later on there's this one customer who's like threatening to sue me for literally $100 million when I'd already delivered the service. And you can imagine for most people, if they've never been threatened before, a lawsuit for $100 million sounds kind of scary.
Kind of
But now
scary.
yeah. But now, like having been through like difficult experiences at that time, I wasn't really that stressed about it. I was a little bit stressed, but not half as stressed as I was originally because I was like, okay, I delivered the service that she could try sue me for $100 million, but at the end of the day, I'll probably get that tossed out very quickly,
Yeah.
and it wouldn't actually go anywhere because any judge would look at that, and any lawyer who actually takes that case could actually get debarred because I'd actually delivered the service. It's completely illegitimate. There's no reason why she would ever be able to sue me for like $100 million. One, I don't have $100 million,
Right.
and secondly, there's no damage which I actually caused her, so there's no grounds for it. So
Right.
yeah,
Right. Right. Definitely. I mean, it's basically she thought you were a little fish, and she's just gonna, throw this threat in your face, and you're gonna crumple. But as
yeah,
as you're sharing, it's like, honey, I've already been up against the wall before, and I'm still standing. So
yeah,
this concerns me, but this doesn't scare me. I'm not shook.
yeah.
Been there, done that. I'm still standing right here. Come at me, because like you said, I know this is nonsense. It's not going to go anywhere. So if you think this is going to intimidate me, you're wrong.
Exactly.
you know and that's part of the benefit that we have. See, if we've never experienced failure, now if this was your first difficult client like that, and all of a sudden you're looking at a lawsuit for $100 million, oh my god. But you're like,
Yeah,
you're just another difficult client you know
exactly.
and this is why, and thank you so much for sharing this, because this is what I want people to understand from conversation like this. It's easy to talk about the successes, and that's why I didn't want you to just come here and talk about what it is that you do, because there's plenty of podcasts that do that and do that quite
Sure.
well, and I listened to some of them in preparing for this conversation. But I like to bring my guests here and have them talk about the things that, quite frankly, because let's face it, most of the podcasts you've gone on have been for promotion and PR. So obviously, you want to put your best face forward. You want to talk about what you do. You want to explain to potential clients why they would consider doing business with you. And this podcast might have that same effect, but I always want to go a little deeper. First of all, I
Hmm.
want people to see who is Aidan Sowa, the person, not just the business. And everybody out there is dealing with the same thing. Everyone, I mean, I always like to tell people this. Two performing artists who have almost crippling stage fright are Barbra Streisand and Carly Simon. Now, you would think these are two of the most amazing singers of the 20th century. How could they be afraid to perform? If I had a tenth of your talent, I would be making money singing and performing. But everyone suffers from imposter syndrome. No matter how talented you are, no matter how many successes you have in the past, there's always that little voice in the back of your head says, "Yeah, that was just luck. Yeah, you just wait. It's the other shoe's gonna drop. It's just a matter of time. In fact, see, that's just setting you up. The more success you have, well, then when the big catastrophe comes, oh boy, it's gonna be tremendous." And I like to say, for myself, because I have that happen all the time, even after 63 years. And next year is going to be the 32nd year I've been in business. I literally have been doing tech for half of my life. I say the sound of the other shoe dropping is the next step in the pace of progress towards success. Because the other shoe is going to drop, but it's not going to drop on me and squash me like a bug. The other shoe always has to drop to take the next step forward.
Yeah.
you know and that's just a way for me to deal with that anticipation. And again, he's like, Cornell, you've been doing this for 32 years, and look back at all of the success that you've had. And I've lost a golden client and ended up homeless because of it, because I couldn't pay my rent, which is why I know when I now do workshops with startup entrepreneurs, I don't have a golden client. If you've got one client that you make more than 60% of your revenue with, you are in a precarious situation, because if they go away, how are you gonna cover your overhead? and all these various lessons. But Aidan, I would really like to thank you for joining me on this podcast, and thank you for being my first completely unsolicited guest. You just reached out to me on the internet and chose to be here. I thank you for taking time out of your day and being with me. So, is there anything you would like to share with our listeners and viewers as we close out this conversation?
Well, I would basically just say that like failure is like one of those things which is like inevitable in business, and you shouldn't be afraid of it. Rather, you should just kind of embrace it when it comes and know that it will just make you a tougher individual. So that way, when the next ones come through, you're better and more equipped.
Yes, yes, thank you. Now, I've got up here on the screen your contact information. If you'd like to just say that for the people who are listening to this and not watching this, your website and your email address for those who want to reach out to you.
Sure. The website would be www.velvetvoicepr.com, or you can reach out to me like via email, aidansowa@outlook.com. Another great way to reach me.
Right. Okay. And obviously, those of you who are going to see this, you'll see this is going to be in the show notes. But AIDANSOWA at outlook.com is his email address, and Velvet Voice PR, spell it just like it sounds, all one word.com. Aidan, thank you so much for being with us. And I like I said, I hope that you reach out to your clients and tell them, the same contact link that you had, to book a time. Just tell them, book a conversation. Let's talk. I'd love to have a
Absolutely.
conversation with them about what they do and how failure has been part of the process of their success. And for those of you out there in podcast land, as I always say, remember, life is not a competition with anyone. The only race that you're in is the race with the person that you were the day before. And remember, as Aidan and I discussed, failure is only defeat if you give up. So remember, never surrender, keep running. And until next time, this is Cornell Green, the Failure Guy. I'll see you in the next episode.